This is week 2 of our segment on functional flexibility. Last week was a gait analysis, which is more of a general analysis of how I move and how I function. We found out that my left hip was actually a bit of a problem for me. We've discovered that in the past with other movements as well. So today we're focusing on the left hip, exactly what's wrong with it and what muscles need to be integrated, which muscles aren't communicating with each other. So we're going to go see what John has to say about this.
All right, so we just finished doing a gait analysis on Nick, and we kind of sniffed out a couple of asymmetries, mainly his left hip and right shoulder. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can't figure out what's going on with that using a functional assessment now. All right, Nick, so what I want you to do is I want you to stand on one foot. The other foot's going to be slightly off the ground. It doesn't change positions, okay? So it stays the same height off the ground, and I'm going to have you see how far out you can come and how far back you can come, okay? I'm looking for a few things here. I'm looking for quality of movement. I'm looking to see what kind of strategy your body uses to be able to accomplish this. Okay, so as you go back and forth, I'm just looking to see what's going on with that foot, with that hip, with the knee, the ankle. I'm looking all the way up to the shoulder. Okay, let's go ahead and switch sides for me. All right, I'm looking for asymmetries, and you can already kind of tell the difference between one side versus the other. Every time that right foot comes through, you can see that left knee just kind of takes off to the outside, which means that every time the left knee is being asked for a little bit of deceleration from that hamstring, it's not getting it. What I'd like you to do now is go back on your right foot again. This time I'm going to have you take your arms overhead, okay? All right, so what we did was we took out your ability to lean forward, and as you can see, it becomes a little bit more challenging for you. And immediately we can see the right hip flexor begin to start grabbing. So it wants to be in charge. There's no question about it. That right hip flexor, as we talked about several weeks ago when we did the stuff on the table, that right hip flexor likes to grab on, and it likes to be in charge, it likes to be boss, okay? Now let's check the hip in the frontal plane. So we're gonna go back on the right foot again. We're gonna take the left foot, same rules apply. We're gonna stay as close to the ground as possible, and we wanna just kind of slide out as far as we can and come back home. And we notice the body starts to lean over to the right in order to, once again, protect that adductor on this right side, okay? So that adductor has to lengthen, and rather than it lengthening, it takes the upper body and just kind of shifts it over to the side. And we'll notice on this side that the adductor doesn't have a real good chance, let's say adductor, we're talking about the inside of his leg, it doesn't have a real good chance of decelerating that motion. So when that happens, we notice that the hip just begins to take off. We saw that outside when you were walking.
My knee is buckling as well.
And your knee is buckling and turning out when it should be turning in. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do now is go ahead and go back on your right side, and you're going to do what's called the transverse plane drive, where you're going to drive this way and then open up. So it's kind of a close and an open, just like that. We're looking to see if that big hip flexor muscle, which is the transverse plane muscle, can it decelerate us when we do that. Your foot stays put, and what happens is, as it comes through, the knee takes a big beating, okay? When we're sniffing stuff like that out, it's very important, because then you're going to take that knee and go play tennis, right? So if we can't get the foot to mobilize, and we can't get that hip to mobilize, then when you go out and play, you're going to take a pretty big beating.
I really do think that everyone should invest in functional therapy. I would have had no real idea that my left hip was causing me such problems, and my left knee, I have had 2 knee reconstructions, so that explains that. But definitely functional therapy is well worth the investment, like I said. Remember to connect with us. I'm Nick Davey for KTV.